Hey everyone, happy Monday. Tara Talmadge and Mike Irwin for another edition of Ask Mike. And Mike, it's going to be the last one for a little bit. So of course we answered a bunch of questions.
That's right, a whole bunch of questions. I'll be off for 2 weeks when football season is over, and so I need a vacation.
Well, not over. We still have a bowl game.
That's true, but in between the regular season and the bowl game, I'll be back before the bowl game.
Because that's going to be an exciting time for sure. But
Absolutely.
Like we said, lots of questions this week, so let's jump right in. Our first two questions this week, Mike, are about kind of the same issue. Arkansas's three-man pass rush is the first, pretty much. It's from Patricia Kuhn, who says, the CBS announcers were saying that the Alabama quarterback would have it easy if we only kept a three-man rush on him. Why do you think we didn't try harder to disrupt him? The few times we did, he had trouble throwing the ball. And then Rob's 4516 says, I'm proud of the fight and competitiveness the Hogs showed at Bama, having said that, what needs to change to prevent good QBs from having career days against our defense? Is the answer better recruiting, or is there more to it than that?
Yeah, recruiting has a lot to do with it. Look, here's the basic issue, and it's been this way ever since Barry Odom got here. He basically would rather play a kind of an umbrella defense. He's using 8 guys to drop back in pass coverage and rushing 3, and it's worked in a lot of games. The problem is in some games, like the Alabama game, it clearly doesn't look very good.
Right.
I mean, we saw Bryce Young, their quarterback, when he had time to throw the ball, he was deadly, and when they pass rushed him, he had problems. And I think we've got some statistics to show this up. And we're going to look at the A&M and the LSU games. Against Arkansas, Bryce Young was 31 of 40 for 559 yards and 5 touchdowns. That's an average of 14 yards per pass and a QBR rating of 95.4. Against A&M, who blitzed him heavily, those numbers are way different. He threw it more and had fewer completions. His passing yards were down, just 369 and 3 touchdowns instead of 5. Plus the Aggies came up with a pick. An average of about 7.5 or 7.7 yards per pass, almost half as much per pass as Young had against the Hogs, and his QBR rating was 10 points less against A&M. Now look at this. Against SEC West teams that did not blitz Alabama heavily, Arkansas did have the best showing. The Tide scored 42 points against both Arkansas and Ole Miss, but it was a 7-point game with Arkansas. Alabama beat Ole Miss by 3 touchdowns. Alabama outscored Mississippi State by 40. Alabama's scoring is reduced in both games, however, under heavy blitzing. So clearly, the extra pressure helps. You look at those, a lot of those 9 incompletions in the Arkansas game came under blitz pressure. So again, if you just look at all these stats, it's pretty clear that they had more success when they put pressure on him. I don't know what the internal communication is and the back and forth between Sam Pittman and Barry Odom. I don't know. We do know that Sam has said the last couple of weeks he wanted him to pressure more, and he has been blitzing lately.
Yeah.
But I think ultimately the answer is if you have more speed back there in the secondary and more speed at linebackers, which they're trying to recruit, then I think he's much more likely to go to man coverage and maybe blitz some of these linebackers, cornerbacks, or whatever, because against some quarterbacks, and I want to make this clear, it's not every week, but against some quarterbacks, you definitely need to blitz more. So that's a long answer to those 2 questions.
No, I liked it, and those stats definitely help see it from what you're saying. So,
right.
All right, Mousetown has a similar question about Arkansas's offense against Alabama, and he says, to play Alabama within 7 points makes me so happy, but I really believe we could have won that game if Briles would have turned KJ loose. He's become a great passer, but it's like Briles can't see it. He wasted too many plays trying to run the ball.
You know, I'm going to step in and defend Briles. I've criticized him some too, but here's the problem when you do that. We don't really know, again, the communication between Sam Pittman and Kendall Briles. You say he runs the ball too much. How much of that is Sam Pittman wanting him to run the ball?
Yep.
So there's some indication over the last few games that a lot of that is Pittman too. So to me, if you're criticizing Briles for that, you ought to be criticizing Pittman, and I don't think too many fans want to criticize Sam Pittman. So, you know, let's look at some of the numbers from that game. The Hogs managed 110 yards rushing on 42 carries for 1 touchdown. And that touchdown was on a 1-yard run after the refs overturned a 40-yard touchdown catch by Warren Thompson, saying he was down at the 1-yard line. Arkansas's average per carry just 2.6 yards, but if you look at those passing numbers, 358 yards on 31 passes, 4 touchdowns, and as we've said, really 5, and an average of more than a first down every time Arkansas puts it up. So clearly throwing the ball works a lot better against Alabama than running it. Now that doesn't mean you run it all the time, but let's look at what Alabama did in that game, because they're traditionally a run team, but they've got some problems with their running game this year. They threw it 40 times and ran it just 36 times. Arkansas put it up just 31 times with 42 running plays. So just from the conversations I've had with some fans since that game, I think most fans felt like it should be more like Alabama, run it maybe 5 or 6 more times, or throw it maybe 5 or 6 more times in that game, run it less. And they feel like if they had done that, might have had a chance to win it. I mean, there's no way you'll ever know.
Exactly.
No way you'll ever know.
There's so much on social media, though, right now that's kind of towards Kendall Briles.
Exactly.
It's a little harsh, people. It's not.
And
it's
we're
not
going to
just
see another example of this later on in this question.
Okay, perfect.
I'm just going to say the answer is not always what you think it is.
Exactly. Let's get to it then. Pork Soda asks, 5 minutes left. We needed 2 scores, and Briles called a bunch of run plays and sent the punt team out. This is exactly what I was talking about. And then Pittman called a timeout and went to have a talk with Briles. I got the feeling that Briles thought the game was over, and Pittman obviously did not.
Yeah, I specifically asked Sam Pittman about this in his Monday press conference, and the answer is not what you think. Okay, basically he said both decisions were mine. He said, now you have to understand, let's go back to the part where they called a bunch of running plays.
Yeah.
They actually started off that drive, which started with 5.5 minutes left to go in the game. Arkansas is down by 2 scores. They passed the ball the first 3 times, and on the second pass, they got a first down. Okay. On 1st and 10, they passed it again, so that's 3 straight passes, and it was incomplete. So now it's 2nd and 10, and then they called 2 running plays. So now you're ending up 4th and 11 from your own 35. That's 4th and 11 on your 35. So Pittman said, I'm sitting there and I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute. If we don't make this first down, and 4th and 11, you may not. Against Alabama, they're pretty good. Then I'm opening the door for them to go down and score on us again. This suddenly goes from a 2-touchdown game to a 3-touchdown game, and then everybody all over the country gets the impression when they see the score, oh yeah, Alabama just blew Arkansas out again.
Yeah.
And he said, I didn't want that. But then he said, I started thinking, wait a minute. I'm not showing faith in my players on the field. I'm not giving them a chance to win if I do this, just trying to make the score look better. And he said, I don't think they would have forgiven me for that, and I don't think I would have ever forgiven myself for that.
I love that
So
answer.
I called timeout, and we decided to go for it. And of course, they threw a pass to Trey Knox, made the first down, went down and scored, made it a 7-point game. And had the onside kick been successful, they could have tied it up, sent it to overtime, or maybe scored and gone for 2 points and tried to win it. That statement that he made to me in that press conference explaining this tells you everything you know about why these players like him.
Yeah.
Because he said, I had to show faith in them, and if I didn't, it would make everything he said to them be phony.
Yeah,
you know?
I mean, it's exactly the type of coach that you would want as a player, someone who believes in you and thinks you can do it.
And it proves that sometimes when you do crazy things like go for it on 4th and 11 against Alabama on your own 35-yard line, it works.
Yeah, so worth a shot, I guess, at that point.
Absolutely, it worked.
That's a great answer, too. All right, Lake City Hog wants to know, when more of the coaching dominoes begin to fall, do you see the possibility of Briles actually leaving this offseason? Personally, I would like to see both Briles and Odom stick around for at least 1 more year. What's your position on our coordinators?
Yeah, I don't think either one of them are going anywhere. I haven't heard anything about Odom. And remember, he just got a big raise last year. Yeah. I don't think he would leave unless he got an offer of a pretty good coaching position.
Maybe a head coaching job.
Yes, head coaching position. Now, look, there are 2 openings right now, you know.
Florida,
and it just opened up in LSU, so those are big jobs. I don't know how the dominoes fall when all that shakes out, but I just don't think either one of them's leaving. What's my position on them? First of all, it doesn't matter what my position on them is because nobody's going to decide their fate based on what I think. You know, from sitting here sometimes during games, I get a little bit critical. I go nuts.
Yeah, get a little animated.
And I say things I probably wouldn't say on the air. I've been critical of Bryles, but I've also smart enough to realize that I don't know who's making those decisions on some of those play calls. You know, they're both down on the sidelines. It's not like one of them's up in the booth and one of them's, they're both down there. They can both talk. So Bryles may want to throw it and Sam may say, no, we're going to run it.
Yeah.
You know, so overall, I would say this. The one thing I don't like about Bryles that I do know that's his is those goofy double reverse trick plays.
I knew you were going to say it.
I wish he would dump all of those. That drives me nuts.
Hasn't really worked out well.
I just like to run your offense. But again, they don't ask me for my opinion on that. Odom, again, I think ultimately they're going to solve this problem of the pass rush, either with better athletes or I think he's going to be forced to blitz more. I do think it hurts at times, as I said before, but at times that system works. So
right. I mean, I was going to ask, you think that Ole Miss job's going to come open?
Well, it's possible, and that would be interesting. I mean, how does that figure in?
Yeah.
You know, because there's two places that Widow Wayne could go.
He wants to go somewhere, apparently, is what it sounds like.
Well, you know, people say he would take the Florida job. I've even heard if the Miami job opened up, he would take that because he supposedly has a place in Florida.
I'm sure
he
he
likes
loves
the
Florida.
beach. He likes Southern Cal, so he probably liked Florida. So maybe Widow Wayne will go, and there'll be an open job at Mississippi.
All right, Armand Abbey says, it seems to me that some of our fans have forgotten what it was like to get run off the field by Alabama. All this stuff about the three-man rush and too many running plays is nitpicking to me.
Yeah, you know, we've just gone through a good example of that. And so, you know, I ask myself, are they getting silly here?
Yeah.
Or is it all right for fans to do that? I'm going to give the answer I always give. And Pittman himself said it pretty much. He said after the game, we didn't come here to get beat by 7 points. We came here to win. So I think the fans have a right, even when you play much better than you're supposed to, even when you play Alabama close and you haven't done that in years, and even when you made Nick Saban sweat a little bit, and you haven't made him sweat in a long time. You still have a right to nitpick if you want as a fan and say, hey, but we could have won that game. So I'm not going to be too critical of these fans. It's not like they're really saying fire somebody.
Yeah.
They're just going, wow, you know, Mousetown, hey, we could have won the game. I'm glad we played well, but we could have won if we did this, this, and that. That's just what fans do.
You just don't want to get to like the Alabama level where they're 9-1 and fans are upset.
Yeah, that's a little nuts. But here's the thing. Everybody's happy right now that they've gone from where they were, which was 0, the worst the program shape it's ever been in. I mean, there's never been a 3-year period in the history of this program like the last year under Bielema and the 2 years under Moore. So you're bottom, and then you've come this far, this fast. So everybody's happy.
Should be.
But here's what happens. With the success comes expectations.
Of course.
So next year and the year after, Sam Pittman's going to have to answer these. You know, and I think he will, but he will be hit with he will be scrutinized with a lot of this stuff because that's just what happens when you start to win.
Yeah, I mean, he just keeps raising the bar for himself.
People stop being happy with just playing well, and they want you to win big games. I mean, how long is Alabama? Look, they've done a lot of things. They won the boot.
Yep.
Got the boot back. They got the Southwest Classic trophy back. If they get the whatever the Battlefield Moronical trophy back, if they get that back, that's 3 trophies. And he said at his press conference, "We've never had those 3 trophies in the offseason at the same time. We want that." So all that's good. But there's one more hanging out there. There's no trophy for it. But that's Alabama. That's Nick Saban never losing to you when he was at Alabama. The last time he lost to Arkansas was when he was at LSU. So, again, you know, that's still hanging out there.
Yeah.
And they want. I think Sam Pittman will zero in on trying to beat Nick Saban.
Yeah.
And to do that, you can't play him close. You got to beat him.
Well, hey, I mean, close is a good improvement off of what they've played them the past couple of years.
We're going to expect more.
Agreed. Just heads up, Pittman, in case you're watching.
That's right.
All right. Edward Clutch asks, seeing how well KJ has done this year, do you think we should have just played him last year and not went with a grad transfer? Just curious why you think the coaching staff made that decision?
Well, I think they made a decision because he wasn't ready to be the starter.
I agree.
I mean, he's a lot different quarterback than he was back then, I will tell you. And I think he actually benefited from having Felipe Franks come in here, sit behind him. Franks helped him a lot.
Absolutely.
They worked together every day. So you let him learn a little bit sitting behind him that year, and then he got hurt 2 or 3 times, and KJ got a chance to come in, like against Missouri, and show what he could do. And then I think you have to give Kendall Briles a lot of credit for the way he's developed KJ in the offseason. Through the spring, I saw him get a lot better as spring progressed.
Yeah.
But I still had a lot of questions about Jefferson when the season started. My biggest question about him was I didn't think he could throw the ball like this. I didn't. And I felt like that would make Arkansas too one-dimensional. And he honestly has developed. He's a very underrated passer right now because, as we've said before, they don't throw the ball like other teams do.
Yeah.
I think if you let him drop back and throw it about 40 times a game, his numbers would be way up there and more people would be talking about him. But he's very efficient. He's made really good decisions at right times. And that's the big surprise to me, is the way he's developed in the offseason. And I think they handled developing him just exactly right. Don't stick him out there too soon. Let him learn under this guy. And look, everybody just takes for granted that they went out and got Felipe Franks. That was a big get.
That was huge.
And that season last year, winning those 3 SEC games with that tough schedule, I think that was huge for this year. That helped set this year up, and it's helped their recruiting. So, no, I have no complaints about that decision to go after Felipe Franks. Within weeks of Sam Pittman taking over, I think they started looking for another quarterback that quickly.
Yeah, because at the same time, even if KJ was slightly ready, he didn't have the experience that Franks had, and that's a huge difference. All right, Pat Boat asks, with the departure of a bunch of defensive tackles, O-linemen, and receivers, what are your thoughts on Miller, Jalen Williams, Henderson, and Turner?
These are all not even backup guys. They're guys that you look at and say, well, can they step up next year? Yeah. They're not as a part of 2 deep, not any of them. You know, Henderson's a sophomore this season. He hasn't played much at all. You don't keep stats on offensive linemen. The word I get on him is they just want him to get bigger. Now, I don't think they're redshirting him necessarily, but I think he's got to get bigger if he wants to play in the offensive line, and he may or may not figure into next year. Marcus Miller, he's going to be a redshirt junior. He's played in 2 games. He has 2 tackles, so he has played some. He is not redshirted, so if he's only played in 2 games and there's just 2 left, to me he's an automatic redshirt, so he'll get an extra year. Now, Jalen Williams, he was the top JUCO defensive tackle in the country last year. But he was only a 3-star, but there was a lot of talk about this guy, and I sort of been asking around over there, and because he hadn't been playing a lot, and I'm told he's got to get quicker. He doesn't move quick enough for them right now, so I don't know whether he needs to lose a little weight. Sometimes you can actually put on weight and do some things to get quicker, but that's the issue with him. Darren Turner, he was a 4-star receiver out of the state of Tennessee, and he was rated the number 3 player out of Tennessee 2 years ago. Now, he redshirted last year. He has no catches this year. Again, I asked about him, and I was told he's not fast enough. The other receivers are faster than him, and that's holding him back. So I don't know, what happens with him next year. But with all of these guys, what I'm saying is the coaching staff will sit back, look at who needs to move up to plug in to replace these guys on the O-line, the D-line, and at wide receiver with Traylon Burks probably leaving. So they'll move people up that played, and then some of these guys may move into backup roles and some may not. But they will evaluate them, and what I think you're going to see is you're going to see some more portal action. They're going to go into the portal and say, well, wait a minute, we got to have a couple of offensive linemen. We got to have a couple of defensive linemen. I don't think they'll go into the portal for a receiver because they're stocked at that position. They got a lot of guys. They're losing maybe the best receiver Arkansas has had in a long time, but there's some guys coming back that are pretty good, and then they've got a really good freshman class coming in. There's a kid over at Fayetteville High School about 2 blocks from where we are, that way. and he is fast.
Yeah.
And so people are really excited about him coming here, and there's a couple other receivers they're bringing in. So I don't see any portal action at receiver, but in the O-line and D-line, yeah, you may see some portal guys be brought in.
Did I hear Pittman say today that Dalton Wagner is not going to walk for senior day?
Yes, I think he told him he's coming back.
He is.
Yes.
That's good to know.
He's been hurt, so he said, I'm coming back. So,
I like
you know, there's answers like that,
yeah.
too.
All right, long-time Hog fan says, we all know we pay large sums of money for some of the smaller programs to come to Razorback Stadium and fill slots in our schedule. Do we also pay teams like Gardner-Webb to play us at the Bud?
Yes, it works the same in basketball as it does in football. Now, why do you do that? Because if you play a team from a major conference, remember when Arkansas had Notre Dame scheduled?
Yeah.
And then it didn't happen because of COVID, but Arkansas was going to go to Notre Dame, and then Notre Dame was going to come back here the next year. If you're playing teams like that from major conferences, you do a home and home, and it works out financially for each of you. But if you bring in an Appalachian State or somebody like that in football or any other sport, you don't want to go to their place because you're not going to make much money off that, and plus you don't want to go to their place and take a chance on getting beat.
No.
So you're basically paying them to come in here and not get a return game.
Yeah.
And the same thing is done in basketball, except that you don't get as much money.
Yeah.
There's not as much money involved in basketball. And I'm told it's also done in baseball and other sports. So again, it's basically a device where you don't have to go to their place. They just agree to come to play you one time, and then you forget it.
Take the money and leave.
Yep. Go home. Here's your money. Beat it.
All right. Pig's Feet says, this may be a sensitive subject, but I was wondering if you could give your thoughts on Title IX.
You know, that was a Supreme Court ruling years ago. And the ruling was basically that if you are an institution that receives any kind of federal funding, and most colleges do, you have to offer equal opportunity to females as you do males, even in athletics. So it was basically a scholarship balancing thing, because in those days, most schools, Arkansas for sure, just had a few sports and not a whole lot of scholarships in those sports. And what this did was it forced you to try and balance that out. Now, there was a compromise, and I can't remember how they arrived at this. I don't think the Supreme Court had anything to do with it. But the compromise was there's no equivalent sport on the women's side to football, which would require 85 scholarships.
Yeah.
If you took all of those 85 scholarships at most schools and just threw them into women's sports, you'd have about 10 other women's sports. So what they decided was they wouldn't balance that, but maybe they would make a little bit of a compromise. So for instance, and this could be wrong now, I haven't looked into it, but there was a few years ago, the women had 15 scholarships for basketball and the men had 13. You might have the same for softball and baseball, 11 for baseball, more for women's softball. So women got extra scholarships, a few extra scholarships in these so-called Olympic or winter sports, although some of them are spring sports. And it all worked out as a compromise. I think that was a good decision. I don't have any problem with Title IX. It's what it's done is it's given women a chance to compete in all these other sports. And while they don't draw the crowds that maybe some of these other sports, there's a lot of men's sports that don't draw big crowds.
Yeah.
You can't tell me that people don't get a little bit excited when the women's basketball team goes over to Jonesboro. We all remember what happened about 10, 12 years ago when Susie Gardner had to take her team in there in a WNIT postseason game, and she went tooling over there telling everybody it was no big deal to play that. And those students over there at Jonesboro just assaulted Arkansas's players with verbal insults, saying horrible things to them. They came back shell-shocked and got beat. And it was all about football. It didn't have anything to do with those basketball players or any of that. Those students were so mad because Arkansas wouldn't play them in football that it turned that into a basketball thing. Well, now look what happens now when Mike Neighbors takes his team over. They just beat the snot out of them. They just went into their place and said, okay, we'll play you. Yeah, we beat the fool out of you. Now we're leaving. Fans like that.
Yeah,
it's
of course.
women's sports, but and you know, we didn't sit around watching it on TV, but it was just fun to read about it.
We watched women's soccer last night.
Yeah,
that was fun.
Got into it a little bit.
You were getting hyped up
about them when it looked like they might not win, but yeah,
Still.
so it's good. I'm all good with Title IX.
Yeah. By the way, soccer did win. So.
They did win.
Okay.
I kept telling you they wouldn't, but
Yeah.
they did.
You know, it's like reverse psychology there.
Exactly. I was trying to put pressure on them.
All right, Dr. Strangefork says, excluding the men's and women's track teams and the baseball team due to their sustained success, which team, men's or women's, has been the most surprising to you in achieving their success, or rather, has had the steepest hill to climb?
I don't think there's any question about that. It's football.
Of course.
The steepest hill to climb, if you looked at where they were, and then we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. It's all the resources that SEC teams put into football. You don't get that in other sports. Every school but Vanderbilt is spending enormous amounts of money. They're taking that SEC football money, TV money, and they're all building brand new facilities.
Yeah.
And so everybody has got a great facility. You go in there. I mean, Alabama, their basketball stadium is still stupid. It looks like an aircraft hangar. But they've got an indoor practice area that's pretty much like Arkansas's. It's really nice. So, you know, it's just very competitive in football per se. It's also competitive more in basketball, but football really competitive.
Yeah.
And so what Sam Pittman has done in turning this thing around has been amazing, because he's going up against schools that are going all out, full bore recruiting every single year. He's had 2 tough schedules. Nobody's given those guys a break. And look where they are right now.
Yeah.
So I give him a lot of credit. And it is football that's come the farthest and had the biggest hill to climb.
Yeah, I think like honorable mention to softball. They've done really well under Courtney Deifel and come a long way for sure.
I mean,
but yeah, it's not the same.
You could say
scale.
that about all these sports. I was telling somebody earlier today, this is my 46th season when it's over. 46th season to cover Razorback Athletics. There's never been a year like this so far. If you kind of combine this year into last year and what's been accomplished, what softball accomplished, what baseball accomplished, what soccer is accomplishing, what women's basketball is doing, you can just go down and name all these sports. The one that hasn't been there is football, and now boom, all of a sudden they're in the equation. If in 2 years they're up there competing for an SEC West title, you got to ask yourself, how does it get any better than this?
Something's in the water over there.
Yeah.
We're not going to complain about it.
I think it's a good athletic director and great fans.
Yeah, that definitely helps. Okay, we kind of have 2 similar questions about SEC referees. Lanny wants to know, what are your thoughts on the officials and Auburn? I was talking to a huge Auburn booster after the Moo Cow loss.
I assume that means...
I was going to say, what?
I'm assuming that means the game at Columbia.
Okay. And anyways, he was upset about the officials hosing Auburn. I found this comical from what I have seen with the love affair with Bama Light. This is a really interesting question. All right. And then Superhog 1959 says, I watched the game 3 times. I saw Alabama false start 3 times, saw targeting twice in the same drive, saw pass interference at least twice, watched that play that was reviewed where KJ was trying for a first down. The Bama player hit him helmet to helmet, no call. Don't you think that they should have seen that?
Okay, let's talk about 2 separate issues.
Okay.
This separate issue where these Auburn, and the Auburn fans are complaining.
Yeah.
Because they felt like they got hosed at South Carolina.
Moo Cow game.
And so a lot of Razorback fans are laughing and saying, wait a minute, Alabama, and Alabama's the one that they believe really gets the favorite calls,
Yeah.
but with Auburn last year and what happened in that game, not this season, but year before down at Auburn.
Even this season, though.
And yeah, there were some calls that went their way. So they're laughing and saying, come on, what are you complaining about? But if I watched that replay last night just to see, and guess what? They got hosed.
They did?
They did. They got hosed, especially that call at the end of the game. They needed the ball back. They had one last drive to try and tie the game up. And there was a punt, and it bounced, and this Auburn punt receiver let it bounce and then kind of ran over there, and it looked like it didn't hit him, and so, you know, it was just their ball, and then they wanted it reviewed, and they overturned the call. And I looked at all of the angles, and you just can't tell. It sort of looks like it might have hit the guy, but it's not incontrovertible evidence.
Yeah.
And that prevented them from getting the ball back and pretty much gave the game to South Carolina. So here's the thing I would say about that. It's these kind of calls that fans feel like can decide a game. It's not just a call, but hey, if you got that right, we still have a chance to win.
Yeah.
It's the whole thing with the Auburn deal last year on the grounding of the football backwards, which is a fumble. The fumble that in midair that apparently is not a fumble because if you're apparently off the ground, you've lost all momentum. You know, all these kind of crazy calls.
Weird rule.
The real issue here for Arkansas fans is not that referees miss calls. They believe they miss them all the time in Arkansas games. Look, I didn't put this one up, but there's another guy that sent me a question, and he's basically saying that if you go back and look at the Henry Heave from that Ole Miss game from several years ago, he said you can find four violations on Arkansas's part where they could have thrown a flag on any of them. And he said, and I didn't go back and look and see if they did, but he said that they could have thrown 4 flags on that play. So why did they let Arkansas go ahead and get that first down? He said because if Arkansas wins that game, it keeps Ole Miss from winning the SEC West and allows Alabama to win it. So he's saying that even in an Ole Miss-Arkansas game, the officials are helping Arkansas to help Alabama.
Interesting.
That's how badly Razorback fans think that these referees do this, and I don't know. That gets too complicated.
That seems like a little bit conspiracy to me.
I'm not sure referees in Oxford are running around going, "Hey, what's the score? What's going to happen in this Alabama game? Let's let the Henry Heave go."
Yeah. I don't really know if that's it.
I don't think it's that bad, but whatever.
All right, Margot Kemp says, we saw some highlights of the game Saturday, and we saw an official throw a yellow flag at that cheap shot to Burks at the end. Who overturned it? Okay, the yellow flag was not on what she calls the cheap shot. Yeah.
If the yellow flag was the ball was a kickoff. It's an onside kick, but it's still a kickoff. Mm-hmm. Everybody that knows the rules knows that on a kickoff, if the ball goes out of bounds, there's a flag and an immediate penalty. So that's what the flag was about. It didn't have anything to do with Burks getting basically run over like a freight train by their big stud linebacker. The question I asked, and I went over today and asked that went over Monday and asked when I was at the press conference, Pittman's press conference, because I never thought about this. They talk about a defenseless player.
That's what we were talking about.
So if you're on the kicking team, but the ball gets kicked and it goes up, and you're over on the edge, and you want to go up and maybe grab that ball after it goes 10 yards and come down with it. Okay, you're looking up. You're a defenseless player, just like a receiver. And if you get run over, I mean, if you were a receiver and you were standing like this and going to catch the ball and they ran over you, not only would it be pass interference, you'd probably get targeting.
Yep.
For hitting a defenseless player. So to me, Burks was a defenseless player in that situation.
I completely agree.
But I asked and they said it is not a penalty because if you are the team that's receiving the ball, which Alabama was, you're allowed to block anybody because you're blocking for whoever comes up with the ball on the kickoff. So you're allowed to go nail people and just, I'm blocking this dude.
It's just,
so the linebacker could say, all I was doing was blocking Traylon Burks.
It was just such an aggressive hit, though.
It was. But again, nobody over there associated with the team felt like that they were going to get a call on that.
Yeah.
It just looks bad. And by the way, I want to say this because a lot of people have been asking. Burks went through practice.
Good to know.
So on Sunday, so it looks like he's going to play. There was all kinds of stuff when I went over on Monday. Oh, he's got a broken collarbone. He's out.
Yeah, people are worried about it.
He'll never play for Arkansas again. He's out for this game. He's not going to play in the bowl game. There's no evidence of a broken collarbone. Sam Pittman just said he's really beat up right now.
Understandably as well. Whippersnapper asks, do you have a bucket list of bowl games you'd like to attend, whether or not the Hogs are a part of the game either?
You know, I missed I think it was Lou Holtz's second year, they went out to the Fiesta Bowl.
Okay.
And that's in Tempe, but it's in the Phoenix area, right? Isn't that where Tempe is?
So, yeah.
Phoenix area. I've always liked the desert. I wouldn't want to live in the desert, but I kind of like, you like the desert?
Is it because of Lubbock?
Well, Lubbock's not really the desert.
I mean, it's pretty flat, though.
Yeah, but it's not desert. You got to go over to New Mexico to get into the desert. And I've been over there. I've been through Phoenix. I've landed there a few times and then went on to places like Seattle. I've driven through there once or twice. I do like the desert. I do. Just to look around, you see all those cactuses and big mountains in the background.
It is pretty cool.
That's kind of cool. But I wouldn't want to live there, but I wouldn't mind going to a bowl game where you're there for 5 or 6 days, 10 days or whatever. And I've never been to that bowl. So that's one I would like to go to. Probably won't.
Yeah.
The Rose Bowl is a game, it's called the granddaddy of them all. You know, it's the first bowl game or whatever.
I feel like everyone wants to go to that.
But truthfully, the Rose Bowl is a dopey stadium. I've looked at it. It goes way back flat. Now, if you're old like me and you have to walk up steps, that's easy because the rise from the bottom to the top is more gradual.
Yeah, it's not like this.
But what happens to you when you end up back at the end? You're on like 1,000,000 miles from the field. Instead of being up where you can look down, you're like way back and you're looking and go, hey, and that's when in the old days, they had these binoculars. Most people today don't understand that when I was a kid, guys would take binoculars to their game and they'd be looking at them going, binoculars?
And there's some people in the press box that use them.
Yeah, well, you really need binoculars at the Rose Bowl. And plus, I don't want to go to California. I used to want to go there when I was a kid, so I don't think I'd want to go to the Rose Bowl. The bottom line is, the best bowl for media people is the Cotton Bowl.
I knew it.
Because they treat us better than any other bowl. It's not even close. You get treated, if you're in the media at the Cotton Bowl, you get treated like royalty. Great food, great service, great hotel. It's a 5-star hotel. None of us could ever pay to stay there in real life. Like $500 a night or something. We can stay there, but and you can tell, I've said this before, when you go there, the waiters and the people that work there are used to dealing with wealthy people. And they run around looking at us like, who are these guys? They don't know what they're doing. They don't tip us. Oh, this is terrible.
But you still like it?
Oh, I love it.
Still love it.
I don't care. The little guys running around in the little Scottish-looking plaid things and a little vest and things. It's okay. It's fun. But the food is great. And, I mean, they have a great media room where you can just go in and do pinball machines and foosball and computers and all kinds of stuff, TV monitors everywhere. I love the Cotton Bowl.
Probably not this year, but maybe another time. That would be fun for sure.
Bowl. It's a great bowl game.
All right, Blood Red Hog wants to know, if money were no object, what one major change or improvement would you make to the athletic facilities or grounds at the U of A? Okay,
now he said money was no object, right?
Yes.
So what I'm proposing would cost about $1 billion. I mean, it'd be so much money, I don't know where they'd come up with it.
I'm really eager to hear what this is.
Okay, first thing you do is it involves completely changing the west side of the stadium, not just the outer part of the stadium, but everything on the west side and around to the north side. Arkansas does not have what I feel like is a proper tailgating arrangement for a home games. I mean, Little Rock's got the golf course. Ole Miss has the Grove that everybody talks about. So what I would do is create an awesome tailgating situation. And it would start with taking Razorback Road. And if you think about where Razorback Road is down by the track, and you go up this big hill, just go into the side of that hill and just bore it open, bore it down, and put the road where, when it went behind the football stadium, it would be below the ground level. And you go right through there, and then you come up after that up to the road that intersects past the parking lot. Then, once you've done that, you go and you dig out that parking lot that's on the other side, on the west side, just dig it totally out down to that same level. Then you build up a great concourse that comes up where you come out of this football stadium and you're walking over the road. It's below you.
This is very fancy.
And you're walking up little steps and you're slowly going higher, and you've done the same thing across the street because you've now got a parking lot below it. And then you build everything up above it, and you build all of these little steps, and you have these planters where you have trees, and then you have a statue of a coach or a player. And you have, like, I mean, Alabama's got about 5 of them. Arkansas's got 2. They've got Frank and John. I'm talking about 50 statues. You got them scattered everywhere, and you got little plaques. And what this would be is a great area for if you're on a vacation and you're a Hog fan, and you want to come to Fayetteville and see the home of the Razorbacks. That's where you go, because you walk around in this, almost like a park where you got trees and steps and little plaques. And oh, this is the first great All-American at Arkansas. Oh, this was Frank's statue, and all of this stuff.
That'd be pretty neat.
Then you do the same thing around on the north side. You dig down below, you put your parking lot below, and then on top, you create this thing where it all comes across at the same level.
Okay.
And you've got this trees and planters and all this stuff. Now, again, if you're on vacation, it's just a great place to come and visit. But on game days, it becomes a giant tailgating area right outside the stadium.
That would be so fun.
It would blow the doors off the Grove.
That would be awesome.
Because you're right there. All you got to do is just walk from there and you're at the stadium.
Yeah.
But you've got all these trees and walkways and steps and all these statues. I'm a big believer in statues.
Yeah.
I like to look at, as long as they're good statues. Now, if they look stupid and doesn't look like the real person, then that's terrible. But if you've got this good statue of somebody like Ware Schoonover, you know, one of the first All-Americans, or just anybody from the past that fans don't know a lot about.
That would be really neat. I like that idea.
Absolutely. And then you see those and you read about the guy and you go, oh, I never heard about him. And it's just fun. You take your kids there, they learn Razorback history, and you can picnic there. They could have little tables where people could sit and eat and look at all that stuff. And all of that would only cost $1 billion.
And then it would be fine.
Well, you could get some of it done by the state of Arkansas. You could just say, hey, look, Governor.
You're turning it into a park.
We need Razorback Road to be tunneled down, and you can pay for all that, and we'll do the rest
It'll be totally fine, right?
I'm sure the people at Arkansas State would love that.
Yeah, as well.
The taxes on that.
All right. One more question for you, Mike. It's from Alex Forhogs88. Is back actually this week.
Yeah, he had another question.
I know, it's just like the weekly question about memories of previous games with the opponent. So he says, we have a lot of bad memories when it comes to Missouri. What was the most maddening loss against them?
First of all, let me say, I don't think much about Missouri.
Yeah.
I just don't. It doesn't
I
cross
had no
my mind
idea.
a lot.
I'm kidding.
I don't like Missouri. I think that I would love to see the SEC. We've discussed this before. They don't kick teams out of conferences. But I'd love it if they told Missouri to leave and let Oklahoma State come in. That would be a great
That would be
replacement.
interesting.
Missouri to me has always been like a Big Ten school. If you go up there, it has a Big Ten feel to it. My first trip up there was Bielema's second year, 2014. And Brandon Allen, the quarterback, had this hip pointer. I don't know if you've ever had a hip pointer. That usually is a football injury, but you get hit right on the edge of your hip on either side, and man, it hurts. You can't even hardly walk if you've got that. And they needed him. They felt like they needed him to win that game, so they injected him with a super-duper painkiller right before the game. And it worked. Arkansas was leading. He looked pretty good. Everything was going fine. When they came out of the dressing room, you could tell that pain medication had worn off because he was limping, and it got worse and worse. And Missouri came back. Then they took the lead pretty late in the game. So Arkansas's got enough time maybe to drive down and tie the game up. They're down by 7 points. It's dark. It's nighttime. Brandon Allen's struggling. He runs. I think he may have gotten hit on a pass attempt. I can't remember if it was a run or what. But he got knocked out of bounds. And he looked like he wasn't going to get up. And I'm looking at Austin Allen, his brother over there, and I know that Austin can play. I know he can. And I'm thinking to myself, come on. A healthy Austin Allen, even in experience, is better than Brandon, who can't even hardly move. Come on, coach, what are you doing? And so he gets knocked crazy over there, and I'm thinking, he can't get up. Okay, this is when Austin comes in the game. Okay, you got a shot. And then I can't believe it. Brandon Allen gets up and he talks to Bielema, and he just limps back out there like a grandpa that's 85 years old, and he can't move, and they don't go anywhere, and they lose the game.
That's just awful.
So after the game, we're in this dopey place for a press conference. This is another thing about Missouri. They don't have any facilities. They certainly didn't in those days.
Yeah.
The media interview area was outside, not in the locker room, because the visitors' locker room is too small.
Was it still under the...
You're under a dopey tent outside. And the thing is, the light that they put on it is on above the tent. I mean, that'd be like me trying to light your face and putting a light up here, and there's a covering over the top. It didn't do any good, so he's dark. Anyway, we couldn't hardly see him with our cameras. And plus, the band and fans are walking by just a few feet away, and they're yelling stuff, and you know, it's annoying and all this stuff. And so he gets asked, hey, did you ever consider playing Austin Allen? What are you doing? Blah, blah, blah. And he said, and I'm paraphrasing here, but he said, I did, but the players all told me that they had faith in Brandon and they wanted Brandon to play. And I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute, you're the head coach. You don't, the
Yeah.
players don't get paid to make those decisions. That's an emotional thing by them. You're the one that should decide. And come on, one guy can't even move, and the other guy is totally healthy and a pretty good player. So it was my only trip there.
Yeah.
At that point, it was my first trip there, and I just thought it couldn't have gone any worse.
Well, also as a coach, you want to protect your players, and if your guy can't even walk,
Yeah.
probably a good idea to pull
Look,
him out.
I freely admit I don't have a good opinion of Missouri. I don't like the Battle Line Trophy, even though Pittman said today that they want that trophy so they can have all 3 of the trophies.
Right.
Okay, that's nice. But they've tried to, look, I will admit that some fans see this as a rivalry. I will also admit that some of the players definitely think it's a rivalry. I think it's got to do with losing to these guys for 5, 6 years in a row, however many years it's been. And then Missouri kind of makes it, but I think they do see it as a rivalry. And they pop off a lot. Drinkwitz popped off last summer at SEC Media Days and said stuff, you know, pretty demeaning stuff, little jokes about Arkansas. And I thought it was interesting at Sam Pittman's press conference when he got asked today by somebody who clearly had this figured out if he had any kind of personal relationship with Drinkwitz, because coaches, you know each other.
They all talk.
And he sat there and with this blank look on his face, and he said, no. So the guy with the Star Wars laser thing, I don't think there's any love lost between us.
It's like sense the tone, people.
The message from me is, no, I don't see Missouri as a rivalry, but beat them.
There you
just
go.
Beat them and then forget them.
Yeah, because I mean, I agree. There are bigger rivalries that Arkansas has than Missouri.
I'll tell you what's going to become a big rivalry in a few years is Texas is back into the picture. Oklahoma's going to be in the picture. So you're going to have LSU, Oklahoma, and Texas, and probably still Ole Miss and Alabama. Those are rivalries, not Missouri.
No, I agree. All right. That's all we have this week. Mike, it's going to be a minute again before you come back. How many? 2 weeks?
2 weeks.
2 weeks, guys. So hope you enjoyed this edition of Ask Mike. We'll see you back here in a couple weeks.